achieved.
There's just this interesting trend I see going on in mixed martial arts. We like to put fighters up on a pedestal as if they're untouchable, and that's the one extreme. And that's Khabib right now. I took a lot of ridicule for picking against him. You know what? I'm fine if you don't agree with me, but to call me an idiot or point out that I'm just foolish, and yes, he won the fight. He was fantastic. I've picked him many times before. I felt Dustin possessed some of the skills that would definitely have given him some issues. I feel like a lot of the Khabib supporters and fans might have been a little nervous in that second round when he was getting cracked with some big shots. Might have been a little bit nervous when Dustin was trying to lock up a guillotine and had a few moments. But ultimately, the better man prevailed. Khabib put a great performance together, and I'm looking forward to his next fight, whether it be against against Tony Ferguson or whoever else. I'm hoping it's not against Conor. He already established he's infinitely heads and tails better than Conor McGregor. But ultimately what I'm saying here is that we have one extreme where people just look at a fighter, he's untouchable, he's this, he's that, and then we have the other extreme where once that fighter loses, they're just completely written off, and people start to go back and analyze and backtrack through their record. This guy's not legit, this guy wasn't anybody. And I feel like that, when Fedor lost, when George St. Pierre lost to Matt Serra, when Anderson Silva lost, look at Michael Bisping. He suffered through it all his career. No matter who he defeated, people always downplayed his accomplishments, downplayed his success, downplayed his longevity. And yet, if you were to ask anybody in the business, there's a very few people fighting the business who wouldn't have traded their career for his, based on what he accomplished. But I just feel like we either, there needs to be a happy medium somewhere. We either put these guys up on a pedestal and make them almost godlike beings, untouchable, and then criticize people when we say they might lose this fight, because ultimately most people are going to lose a fight before their career is over. Or the other extreme is once they do lose, or if they have some struggles, we start to just dump on them wholeheartedly. It's concerning. It's massive swings. So, it's just something I try to avoid in the prediction game, because you have to try and be in the middle somewhere and recognize what a fighter brings to the table and how styles make matchups. Ultimately, though, Khabib won that fight. He's a fantastic fighter. I don't know why people think I'm so much against him. Like I said, I've picked him on multiple occasions, and I point out his flaws. That's my job. I also point out his opponent's flaws. I try and find how each fighter is going to win and lose and who ultimately I'm going to go with. So that's what it comes down to. Welcome back to Kamikaze Overdrive MMA Predictions. Always, I am your host, Scott Johnson, and on this episode of the show, we are breaking in the upcoming UFC Fight Night 158, which will go down in my neck of the woods, Vancouver, British Columbia, Canada, at the Rogers Centre on September 14th, featuring 6 main card fights, which I'll be giving you my predictions for. All of my preliminary picks will be available at kamikazeoverdrive.net, so please check them out. The bet packs obviously didn't do overly well on the night. I went 6-6 at the last card. They've had a couple downturns, but again, they will be for sale for $15. I give you a full breakdown top to bottom, and we'll just see how things play out. I'm very much looking forward to this card. It looks like it's a fantastic card. Both the main card and the prelims have some pretty fun fights on it as well. Let's see how they play out. And before I get to my predictions, you can follow me on Twitter at KO_predictions. So without further ado, let's get to the first fight of the night. Our first fight of the night goes down in the UFC's light heavyweight division as the 15th ranked Misha Cirkunov looks to hold on to that ranking. He comes in with a record of 14-5-0 from Latvia originally, but grew up in Toronto, so this could be considered a home field advantage for him fighting in Canada. He'll be taking on undefeated Australian Jimmy Crute, who obviously is looking to take that ranking away. Now, Cirkunov has hit a bit of a wall as far as competition is concerned. Over his last 4 fights, he is 1-3 overall. Stoppage losses in all 3 defeats, but he's taken on some of the top-level guys. Former title challenger Volkan Ozdemir, former title challenger Glover Teixeira, and future title challenger Johnny Walker have all taken him out. Mixed in, there was a submission over Patrick Cummins. Now for Crute, as I said, he's undefeated. He got a TKO victory on the Contender Series. He debuted with a submission win over Paul Craig in a fairly entertaining fight, and then he scored kind of a controversial but still relatively definitive TKO victory over Sam Alvey in his next matchup. Obviously, this is a step up for Crute. Considered maybe a little bit of a step back for Cirkunov, but again, Crute is on the rise. Physically, Misha, 1 inch taller. He'll have a 3-inch reach advantage, but he is the older man by 9 years. Now, when you look at Misha, he won his first 4 fights in the UFC and 8 overall. He was on an 8-fight winning streak. He looked like he was the next big thing coming into the promotion, but then his chin caught up to him against some pretty heavy hitters. Now, that being said, and again, heavy hitters is the correct term here, the 3 guys that knocked him out, of their combined 62 career wins, 43 of them have come by knockout. So he's not getting knocked out by anybody but big guys who hit hard. Now, it's worth noting with Misha, his last 4 fights have all been first-round finishes, and all of them have lasted less than 3 minutes. So for the most part, we really haven't seen a lot of what Misha's brought to the table, any improvements he's made. We've had very limited amount of time to really get a feel for what he's bringing to the cage. So coming into this fight, again, we're kind of maybe flying blind a little bit as to what to expect from him. Now for Jimmy Crute, he's got 3 straight finishes. 7 of his 10 wins have come by finish, 4 knockout, 3 submission, 6 in the first round. So he knows how to get fights out of there, but he's shown also, especially in the Craig fight, getting that 3rd round submission, he can finish longer matchups. Now, Misha has a very strong clinch game. He's got that judo background. He's got a very good jiu-jitsu background as well. He's got an overall good grappler. He's got good takedowns. He's excellent from top position and good submissions overall if he gets in a position to get there. Against Cummins, the finishing sequence was a thing of beauty. He set up the body lock, used a trip to put him on the ground, immediately moved to mount on Cummins, and then set up an arm triangle. Finished a very talented, very good wrestler. That was fending off some takedown attempts as well from that wrestler in that fight. Now, it's worth noting with Misha, he is 5-0 in fights where he completes at least 1 takedown, and 0-3 when he does not. And in all 3 of those fights, he's been finished where he does not get a single takedown. I want to say he finished all his opponents in the other matchups. So, yeah, it's worth noting. It's worth noting that, again, he's one of these guys who, if he gets in on you and he can get you to the ground, you could be in some serious trouble. And when you look at Jimmy Crute, when you go back to his debut fight, he gave up 3 takedowns against Paul Craig. And Craig is a very good grappler. He's not a very strong wrestler. And we saw Crute have some issues on his back in that fight. But at the same time, he pulled off some nice sweeps, some nice reversals, and eventually that led to the submission victory. He might have been behind on the cards in that fight. It was very close, very interesting. He said he was a little bit disappointed with his performance, but nonetheless, it was a victory. Now, also in that fight, Paul Craig likes to work off his back, which kind of makes him more willing to give up position and accept some of those transitions and those reversals, where Misha is very heavy. He gets in top position, he wants to hold it, he knows how to hold it, and that's what he's going to focus on here. If this fight goes to the feet, Crute looked to be an improved striker against Sam Alvey. He stood on the outside very effectively. He threw a lot of single strikes, but they were very sharp. He had a nice straight right. He was working solid head and body kicks in there as well. Ultimately, a right hand put Alvey down and led to the finishing blows on the ground. And for Misha, he can strike. He seems to be a little bit stiff for my liking. He will stand and trade, but it does create the potential for him to get clipped and knocked out and those issues to come back. And in this fight, Jimmy Crute could absolutely knock him out. We saw in his Contender Series fight that he's capable of putting guys down if he lands flush, but I don't know if he has the skills to routinely close the distance, land those big offensive strikes, and avoid getting tied up with Misha. I think Misha's going to be able to have success closing the gap, clinching up with him. Once he clinches up with a guy, you're in some serious trouble. Look for him to drag Jimmy Crute to the floor, control him on the ground once he gets there, and eventually work to his back position. And my prediction is Misha Cirkunov to defeat Jimmy Crute by submission. Moving down 1 weight class, we head to the UFC's middleweight division as the always entertaining Uriah Primetime Hall, currently ranked 12th in the division with a record of 15 wins and 9 losses, takes on the 13th ranked Antonio Carlos Jr., also known as Shoeface. He carries a record of 11 wins, 3 losses, and 1 draw. Now, Hall is coming off that big-time knockout win over Bevon Lewis in a fight where he lost the first 2 rounds and then took over once Lewis started to gas out and finished him. Prior to that, he lost to Paulo Costa, who seems on the cusp of fighting for a title. And then before that, Hall had similar success to the Jocko fight, where he struggled early, mounted a comeback, and got the finish. For Antonio Carlos Jr., he was on a 5-fight winning streak heading into his Ian Heinisch fight before losing that matchup by decision. He beat the likes of Tim Boesch, Jack Marshman, Eric Spicely, Marvin Vettori, all very impressive victories. 4 of his last 5 wins have come by submission, all by rear naked choke. Physically, the Brazilian is 2 inches taller, though the same reach. He is the younger man by 6 years. Now, this is a very interesting fight between 2 fighters with impressive skills, but have ultimately struggled to round out their entire game to the point where they can make that run and make that jump to the next level. Antonio Carlos Jr. might have some time left. I don't know if Uriah Hall does, being much more than a fight night action fighter. Entertaining, but still there's some issues there. Now, when you look at these 2 guys, and you look at what they bring to the cage, we actually have 2 pieces of a puzzle that fit together quite well. And they produce some interesting scenarios. The question is who wins. When you look at the Brazilian first, he's known for starting very strong with his grappling game and then fading in the second half of fights, and we've seen him either hold on to try and grind out a decision. In the Dan Kelly matchup, we saw him get finished in that fight. Ian Heinisch, he started strong, faded, and lost the decision there. And you look at Uriah Hall, he's known for starting a little bit slow, surviving, and then rallying for late victories. The first Gegard Mousasi fight, the Lewis matchup, the Jocko fight, all those matchups, he had early struggles, and then at some point he was able to land a big fight-changing blow that took his opponent out of the fight and ultimately led to a victory. Now, that scenario ultimately favors Hall. It would suggest that Antonio Carlos Jr. is going to come out strong, going to look for some takedowns, and either maybe even have some success, but he's going to fade, and Hall's going to stop him midway through the second round into the third round. We'll see. But Antonio Carlos Jr.'s strong start usually comes on the strength of his grappling. He's a jiu-jitsu black belt. He's an ace on the mat. He is an absolute monster there. 5 of his 8 submissions have come in the first round. One other one against Eric Spicely, who's a capable grappler, came in round 2. Antonio Carlos Jr. has also taken down 10 of his 11 UFC opponents. His only time he hasn't taken down his opponent came against Kevin Casey in a fight that ended very quickly and ended by no contest. He has shown he can put up big takedown numbers, but not as many takedowns in recent fights, more earlier in his UFC run. Now, conversely, for Hall, his takedown defense is 71%, but he has had issues with fighters that want to put him on the ground. Guys that want to focus on taking his striking out of the equation, which, hey, why not? If you're a strategic fighter, that absolutely seems to be something you need to look at. Jocko dominated him on the ground and won the decision. Ian Heinisch, getting things mixed up there. Mousasi had similar success taking him down and putting it to him in that fight. So that raises the question, can Hall either stay vertical to utilize his wide striking advantage, or can he survive on the ground long enough for his opponent to slow down? When I look at the way these two are going to trade, and when I look at the way Carlos Jr.'s fought his last couple of fights, I wonder if ACJ can take him down at all, and at least get in and close the gap before he gets tired and before he's forced to stand and trade with him. I wouldn't be surprised to see him get a takedown. Hall's pretty good at surviving on the ground. His takedown defense is decent, but it's not all worldly. But he seems to be this guy who can at least do enough to just stay out of trouble. And then once he gets you back to your feet, then things start to change. In this matchup, I really like the speed of Hall and his counter-striking skills. Antonio Carlos Jr. is used to being the longer fighter. He's not going to be here. I think he gives up a half-inch reach to Hall in this matchup, and he's same thing with his legs. So he's going to have to come forward to set up those takedowns and close that gap. And Hall is so fast with his hands and so good with his hands that I think, despite the fact he's had issues pulling the trigger, I think this is an opportunity for him to really shine in this matchup because he's facing a fighter who's going to want to come forward continuously. Again, if Hall gets taken down, he'll absolutely have to be careful and have to be mindful of giving up his back and making some bad decisions and look to just maybe hold on, ride out the round, get back to his feet, and then go to work again. But I think what we're going to see here is, again, a similar situation where Uriah Hall either catches Jr. early or survives some bad exchanges and then scores one of those definitive blows. And my prediction is Uriah Hall to take out and defeat Antonio Carlos Jr. by knockout. The third fight on the main card transpires in the UFC's welterweight division as, and again, I'm probably going to butcher this, Michel Pereira, 22-9-0 with 2 no contests, makes his second UFC appearance, taking on very short notice injury replacement, Canadian-born Tristan Connelly with a current record of 10 wins and 6 defeats. Now, Connelly is replacing Sergey Kazadonko, again, I'm probably butchering that, on less than a week's notice. He is a winner of 5 of his last 6 fights and has only lost in that span coming against UFC veteran Shane Campbell. For Pereira, he's coming off a very impressive flying knee knockout of veteran fighter Danny Roberts. He's won back-to-back matchups. We'll talk about him in a moment as far as why he's impressive. Physically, Pereira is a massive welterweight. He looked huge against Roberts, who isn't small by any stretch of the imagination. In this fight, he'll be 3 inches taller. He is the younger fighter by 8 years as well. And it's worth noting that Connelly traditionally fights at 155 pounds. So this will help him make weight, but this will still make him the much smaller man in this matchup. Now, Michel is an incredibly... Again, I know it's Michel, Michael. Its pronunciation is throwing me off here. It's a wild man. He throws all kinds of crazy techniques. He's very hard to get a good read on because of all this unorthodox techniques. Versus Roberts in a very short fight, he was flying around the cage, mixing up his speed, slowing down, speeding up. He jumped off the cage, I think, twice. He just threw some crazy techniques at him. Eventually landed a flying knee and a sequence of punches to KO Roberts. Absolutely obliterated him. And lived up to the hype in his debut, which just, guys, you could tell the announcers were excited, knowing what potentially he brought to the table, and he absolutely delivered on it. Overall in his career, 9 wins by knockout, 6 by submission. He's a jiu-jitsu black belt, so he's dangerous on the mat as well, just to say he's not just a one-dimensional fighter, at least. Now he has 1 loss by knockout, 1 loss by submission as well, and overall he is 6-7 in decisions, which is kind of indicative of a fighter with an erratic style that he might not be able to maintain over a full 15 minutes against a more traditional fighter who might have to survive the opening 5 minutes and then kind of take over, which is most likely what most guys do against him if they can get out of the first 5 minutes. Now, for Connelly, he hasn't fought in 17 months. He's making his debut and he's moving up in weight class. That's not easy. Yes, he's fighting at home, which will absolutely help him, but still it's a tough spot. He has 2 wins by knockout, 8 wins by submission, 1 loss by knockout, 1 loss by submission, and he's 0-4 in decisions. He's a bit of a scrapper. In the fights I've seen, the footage I've seen of him, he'll throw hands. He mixes in some nice elbows at short range. He clearly feels comfortable in the mat by the submission numbers, but he's not afraid to sit in there and mix it up in the pocket and trade. But unfortunately, he doesn't seem to have the athleticism or the tools needed to really work here. My best hope, or his best hope, I would think, would be one of two scenarios. That Pereira gasses out trying crazy techniques, and Connelly's just able to outwork him in rounds 2 and 3, just exhaust himself. Or the second one is that Connelly catches him with a flash finish, whether it be a knockout, times a counter well as he moves forward, or potentially picks up some type of, hurts him and gets a submission, or just benefits from an interesting scenario, is able to tap him out. Those are some Hail Mary situations. I think Pereira is just simply too unorthodox. He's too big, and Connelly's facing too much adversity, too many difficult scenarios here to stand much of a chance. And as much as I'd like to see a Canadian do well here, I think it's just all about Michel Pereira. And my prediction is Michel Pereira to defeat Tristan Connelly by knockout. In the UFC's heavyweight division, we get Jeff Lights Out Hughes 10-2-0 making his UFC sophomore appearance against, he's back, the 9-3 Todd Duffee. Feels like it's been ages because it has. Todd Duffee, where have you been? Now, Hughes is coming off a short notice debut defeat to Maurice Green. It was a rematch from just a couple fights ago, and the first fight he actually won that matchup. Now, for Todd Duffee, he hasn't fought in over 4 years. In that fight, he lost a very entertaining, short 73-second knockout against Frank Mir. He's been very inactive because of illness and injury and just a myriad of problems to prevent him being, involved. At once thought to be a guy who could be a future contender, obviously not the case now. Not saying he can't get back into it. He's still very young. I think he's 33. Very young as far as the heavyweight division is concerned. Physically, Duffee 1 inch taller, 1 inch reach advantage, and he is 3 years younger. Like I said, Duffee 33 despite the inactivity, so very much a guy who could string together a couple of wins and start turning some heads if he can get it going and stay healthy. Now, Duffee's super aggressive. 8 first-round wins, 2 first-round losses. He's 1-1 outside of the opening frame. That tells you a lot about him. For Hughes, he's a bit of a slow starter. He has 3 5-round fights under his belt, where he went 2-1. He has 3 3-round fights under his belt, where he went 2-1 as well, coming off that loss to Maurice Green. He's a guy who tends to get going after the first round and finds his groove and just kind of takes over matchups, which at heavyweight, that can be actually very effective. Now, while Duffee is very aggressive and willing to come out and just try and smash you, his chin has become a major point of concern. He's been hurt and finished on multiple occasions. And when you look at Hughes, at heavyweight, he's fought 12 times professionally. He's been knocked out just once, and I think it was in the 5th round of a 5-round fight. So that tells you it took a lot to get him out of there. It wasn't a flash KO, or at least he took some damage prior to going down. So it could take him more than one shot to get him to the mat. He has 4 wins by knockout, but he's also 5-1 decisions. So his ability as a heavyweight to use pressure and just push forward and get the job done is very effective, and that's indicated by the 5-1 record in decisions and the 5-round decisions as well. There are a lot of scenarios working against Todd Duffee. As much as I'd like to see him come back and be a staple in the heavyweight division for a couple of years. He's been out of action for 4 years. He has a lack of long fight experience here, and he's got a questionable chin. All things that are a major concern. Hughes needs a win here after a loss his debut. I think he's going to come out motivated. He's in a better spot with a full camp behind him and with that debut experience already in his back pocket. He has pretty good hands, and he's the far more durable fighter as far as I have seen. Again, Duffee just seems too wild. He got knocked out by Frank Mir during a wild exchange because he had Mir hurt and he opened up. Instead of kind of holding back and remaining defensively responsible, he opened up and he got himself cracked and knocked out. He went for some wide-ranging, kind of almost like schoolyard, I'm going to smack you because you called my mama a name, right hand thing that just didn't work out. And then he was wide open and got KO'd by Mir in the aftermath. I just don't have a lot of faith in Todd Duffee. I hope, if he proves me wrong, fantastic. If I get this one wrong and Todd Duffee looks like a monster here, I'm cool with it. Book him again. Get him in there again. But ultimately, I think Hughes either finishes him early during an exchange or drags him to deep water and drowns him. My prediction is Jeff Hughes to defeat Todd Duffee by knockout. In the co-main event of the evening, we are in the UFC's light heavyweight division as the former title challenger, the 9th-ranked Glover Teixeira, 29-7-0, battles the very entertaining 13th-ranked Nikita Krylov, currently holding a record of 26 wins and 6 losses. Glover is coming in off back-to-back wins over Karl Roberson and Ion Cutelaba. He has wins in 3 of his last 4, and kind of not a resurgence, but just reestablishing that he is far from cooked. For Krylov, he submitted Ovin St. Preux in a rematch, a very effective victory. I think I picked him in both fights, definitely got him right in the second one. He was submitted one fight prior by Jan Blachowicz, which is his return to the UFC. He had won 4 in a row, 9 of 10, and really is putting together a nice little run here. If he can pick up a signature victory here, he's a lesser known, at least bigger name that could certainly work himself into title contention. Physically, Krylov 1 inch taller, 1 inch reach advantage, and he is 13 years younger than Teixeira. Now, Glover said he's a former title challenger. He's trying to hold on to his status. He's barely holding out of the top 10. And when you look at his career losses, obviously John Jones, but then, Phil Davis, Rumble Johnson, Gus, and then Corey Anderson most recently. Those are top flight guys. He has arguably become a very strong gatekeeper to the upper echelon, arguably to the top 5. If you beat Glover Teixeira, you are probably fighting for the title in the not too distant future. We can say that, and it's kind of held true. Davis didn't fight for the title, and neither did Corey Anderson yet. But Davis had a good run in Bellator, won the title there, and Anderson is one of these guys who's knocking on the door as well. Now, for Krylov, who'd love to join that company, he's a very exciting action fighter. He's looking for signature victories to get him to title contention. OSP was a huge victory for him. If he adds Glover Teixeira to the OSP fight, he suddenly puts himself up there with the Dominic Reyes and the Johnny Walkers and these other guys that are starting to make some noise in this division. Now, Glover, as I said, he's coming off back-to-back wins where he got hurt early, survived, rallied, and scored the finish. Does this catch up with him eventually? Is he going to run into a situation, for example, like an aggressive Krylov, that he gets hurt early and can't get out of it and ultimately loses? That's a very good possibility, and you have to think at this level. And as you get older, your ability to come back from early adversity is going to be diminished. And when does that catch up to him? Now, his chin's always been a question mark. You go back to the Fabio Maldonado fight where he got kind of destroyed Maldonado, but at one point kind of got wobbled. He's been knocked out. Of course, Rumble Johnson knocked him out because Rumble Johnson knocks everybody out. Glover's a badass for calling him out. But, there have been some questions about his durability and his chin. And again, as he gets older, that could become an issue. It could become an issue here. But Glover seems very dependent on his wrestling and grappling when those situations pop up. He's able to very effectively, almost by instinct, able to lock up, get a hold of you, and try to get you to the mat to allow him time to recover. And if he gets you to the ground, you are in some serious trouble. When he fought Kuntalaba was a fight where he got hurt early in that fight and was struggling a little bit, but then Eon, gassed out, and that helped Glover to take over and get back in the matchup, and then he got him to the ground and finished him with a rear naked choke. He's very good on the ground, especially if he gets to your back, which is one of his better positions to finish you from. But on the feet, he's got good hands, he's got solid power. I love the way he rolls his head at times to set up his offense. And, Krylov's only been knocked out once, but Glover's that type of guy where if he hits you square, you're going to be in serious trouble. Now, for Nikita, overall 10 wins by knockout, so he knows how to finish guys in the feet. He brings a lot of forward pressure. He's willing to trade. He's got a good chin. As I said, only one knockout loss, so he has the durability edge in this fight. Now, the problem is he is vulnerable on the mat. And when you look at his record first, you go 15 wins by submission. He's also fucking dangerous on the mat, which is absolutely the truth. But he's been submitted 5 losses, and a lot of that comes down to the fact that he is so focused on offensive positioning on the ground that he makes a lot of mistakes. He can be taken down, and he can be put in some bad spots and finished, and we've seen that catch up to him. He had some success early against Blachowicz, but then Jan, and I had Krylov in that matchup, Jan countered him, got him in a good spot, and finished him off. OSP in that second fight, OSP submitted him with the Von Flue choke that we maybe call the OSP choke at this point in time, or the St. Preux choke. Nonetheless, OSP finished him in that one. But in the second matchup, OSP won the first round and had him in all sorts of trouble, all over the mat, just taking him down, controlling him, and won that round. But then he gassed out, which allowed Nikita to rally and get the finish. And that was huge for him. And Krylov has a ton of first-round finishes. He's never gone the distance. So he has some issues as well with cardio if you can force him to work at a pace he's not prepared to work at. He's shown he can go a little bit deeper into matchups as long as he sets the pace that he wants to work at. Now, Krylov has been taken down in 5 straight UFC fights. 9 times overall in that stretch, almost 2 times per fight. I don't think his takedown defense is good enough to hold up against a veteran fighter like Glover who can trade hands and can get you to the ground. If Glover comes out and doesn't look to wrestle and doesn't look to grapple, Krylov can absolutely hurt him. Nikita can absolutely hurt him, could score the finish. He's very opportunistic. He might not be able to... you might not see Glover get back in the matchup. You could see Krylov knock him out. You could see Krylov hurt him on the feet and get on top and submit him, which would be a huge feather in his cap. But again, there's a very real possibility, but it's also a concerning scenario. I think Glover, though, ultimately is too good on the mat. He's too good of a veteran fighter, and Nikita's simply too reckless that unless he lands an early blow, we're going to see Glover get in a position to go to work on the ground. Look for Glover, land takedowns, control him, and either set up that arm triangle from top position or work to his back, soften him up with strikes, and set in the rear naked choke. And my prediction is Glover Teixeira to defeat Nikita Krylov by submission. Finally, in the main event of the evening, we're in the UFC's lightweight division as former title challenger Donald Cowboy Cerrone, ranked 4th in the division, 36 wins, 12 losses, 1 no contest, takes on the 5th-ranked Justin the Highlight Gaethje with a record of 20 wins and 2 losses, the former WSOF lightweight champion. Now, Cerrone's coming off a tough loss to Tony Ferguson, his first loss at lightweight since 2015, where he was defeated by Rafael dos Anjos in a title fight. He beat Hernandez and Ally Quinta in recent matchups. He's been very impressive nonetheless, even with the Ferguson setback. Now, for Gaethje, back-to-back victories over Edson Barboza and James Vick. He had back-to-back losses in absolute wars against Dustin Poirier and Eddie Alvarez, fights that if you haven't seen, I definitely implore you to go back and check those out. Physically, Cerrone 2 inches taller, he'll have a 3-inch reach advantage, and he is 5 years older than Gaethje. And these guys have trained together before, which is huge. Gaethje's openly said that Cerrone concussed him in practice and knocked him out, so that's a while ago, but still you have to realize they have some history and have spent some time together. Now, for looking at Gaethje first, a victory could put him in line behind Ferguson for a shot at the title. Whether it be against Habib, or it's down the road when Habib leaves the title behind, if he opts to retire undefeated, you can see Gaethje in contention for a shot at the title because he's an action fighter. He's the type of fighter people want to see fight. For Donald Cerrone, he's that type of fighter who, even with the loss to Ferguson, people like watching him. He would be a great story. He's a big name. And a win here might put him one win off fighting for the title as well. I could see somebody like Donald Cerrone beat Gaethje, and then you could see him fight Conor McGregor, which would be a fight that people would put together. Or even and then wind up getting a shot at the title as well. I don't know. We'll have to wait and see. Now, Gaethje hits very hard. He's very aggressive. He has a strong wrestling background. And again, a lot of people see that as a good challenge for Habib. We'll have to wait and see if that ever plays out. Now, for Donald Cerrone, looking what he brings to the table, again, we've talked about so much. He offers that dangerous Muay Thai-based striking attack, good knees, a strong kicking game, good punching combinations as well. He has power, 10 wins by knockout. Probably would have more if he wasn't apt to hurt opponents and then go for submissions throughout his career. Now, he strings his combinations very well, strings together his combinations very well, which is hard to deal with the way he sets them up and just goes to work. He's knocked some guys out and he's hurt guys with just some impressive sequences. Now, his chin's been a bit of an issue. He has 5 losses by knockout. Ferguson beat him up, injured him, and then we had a dock stoppage there because he blew his nose. But Darren Till knocked him out, and of course, Darren Till's a massive welterweight. Masvidal knocked him out at welterweight. Dos Anjos with the body TKO victory. And Dos Anjos, is one of those, Dos Anjos showed us, and so we've seen it before, I think Anthony Pettis did as well, that Donald Cerrone's body is an issue. He had a motorcycle accident earlier in his career, earlier in his life, and that certainly is something that isn't 100% okay, and if you hit him to the body, that could be a major issue. Now, for Gaethje, 17 of his 20 wins have come by knockout. He knocked out both Barboza and Vick, guys who have been knocked out previous to that. He had he knocked out Michael Johnson via TKO as well. But when you look at those guys, they have combined 8 losses by knockout. So it's not like they're guys that are ironclad and he's putting them down. So there are guys, he's knocking out the guys he should be. He couldn't get Poirier out of there. He couldn't get Alvarez out of there, even though he put together a hell of an effort and put together a good performance. But, he's got some nice wins so far. He hits very hard. He brings a lot of pressure. He was walking down Vick and walking down Barboza prior to getting the finishes in both those matchups. They weren't long, drawn-out fights, so it's kind of put him in a better spot here as opposed to the other fights he was in where it was just brutal. He offers some very good leg kicks, just thudding kicks that you can almost feel them when you're watching the fight, where he just destroys his opponent's leg if he lands enough of them. He can take away his opponent's base, and again, the way he's pressing forward, and if he can land those kicks, it just takes away your ability to move away from him. And then he throws some decent punching combinations in there as well. Now, if he doesn't get you out of there quickly with that power, he wants to create a war of attrition. He will willingly take your best shots and then land his own and try and tire you out and hurt you in the same time. And that's a huge thing for him. That style worked well in WSOF. It worked well in his debut, which cost me a lot of money because I had Michael Johnson win that fight. But then it cost him against Poirier and Alvarez. He took their best shots. They were better than what he offered. He got put out of there. Long, drawn-out battles that produced defeats. So the question is, can Donald Cerrone do enough without taking too much? Can he handle the pressure of Justin Gaethje? Is Gaethje going to be able to walk him down through that arsenal of potential counterstrikes and long-range Muay Thai offense that's going to be there? Cerrone is a bit of a slow starter. And that's a big question. How does that hold up against the pressure of Justin Gaethje? Does Gaethje's forward pressure and forcing Cerrone to fight, does that actually make Cerrone get engaged quicker in the matchup? Does that bring out his counter strikes and make him a more effective fighter earlier and not allow Gaethje to pull away? Cerrone's cardio hasn't been always amazing. He's shown he can fight full fights, but again, if he's pressured, can he hold up in rounds 3, 4, and 5? We've seen him start to falter. We've seen him start to fade. Now, one thing we haven't talked about yet is the grappling. Cerrone's grappling is incredibly dangerous. He's above average wrestling, sneaky wrestling no one expects, but Gaethje's very hard to take down. And that's an issue. Cerrone could score a knockdown and secure a submission, but I don't see him outright just taking Gaethje down and out-wrestling him. Overall, Cerrone has struggled with pressure, and he's struggled with power, and that's what Gaethje's going to bring in this matchup. I anticipate Justin Gaethje walking him down, landing those big punches, and using his pressure to really nullify Cerrone's long-range weapon. Cerrone's an absolutely dangerous fighter, but he's not the same if he's not bullying you or standing at range. And I think Gaethje's not going to allow him to do either one of those things. And my prediction is Justin Gaethje to defeat Donald Cerrone by knockout. So those are my 5 main card predictions for the upcoming UFC Fight Night 158. All of my preliminary picks will be available at kamikazeoverdrive.net, so check them out. Again, I don't post them immediately. It's a progressive breakdown. I'll post one fight at a time, so you can check them out throughout the week. Usually I finish them by Thursday evening, Friday morning, and then I go to work on the bet packs. They'll be for sale for $15. Again, if you're looking to try and get some inside information or just some more in-depth breakdowns, both fantasy and betting, consider purchasing a bet pack. If you're doing well on your own, you're having success betting and playing fantasy, continue to do it. The important factor is that we're winning and we're taking money home, and that's what it comes down to. Whether it's with my information or not, keep doing what you're doing. I want to see people be successful one way or another. Follow me on Twitter at KO_predictions. Subscribe to me on YouTube. Make sure you click the subscribe button and the bell and everything else. I love the likes. Again, my dream one day is to get 100 likes. I get videos that are between 2 and almost 4,000 views. I think I had one that was just over 5 last couple videos ago. I'd like to see 100 likes at some point in time. I think that'd be pretty cool. Either way, thank you very much for tuning in, guys. And again, we keep the ball rolling. We got lots of fights on the horizon. I'll talk to you in the not too distant future. Take care.